Hello, Polly. Hello, Brenda. I am Sherry Reichert Ballou, author of Say It Now 33 Creative Ways to Say I Love You to the Most Important People in Your Life. And today on our Mango Publishing Heart Wisdom panel, Polly and Brenda and I are going to be talking about the healing power of conversation. Super, super interesting. And I've been very excited. I haven't seen Polly in a really long time. And I just met Brenda live in person. And so I'm so happy to see you, Brenda.
I know. It was epic.
It was epic. And before I have our two distinguished authors and guests introduce themselves, I wanted to just take a moment because I was telling them it's nice to just breathe and get here. And when I was thinking about conversation, I realized it's the same thing, right? That it's so important that we get ourselves present. So we are going to have a really wonderful conversation. And I'm going to have us just close our eyes for a moment and just get here. Maybe take a really nice deep breath and let go of anything that was happening right before we got here. As you're breathing in, just focus on the breath coming into your body. And then exhale, feel it releasing any tension, any stress, any worries. If you're driving, please don't close your eyes, but you can still really focus on the breath and being present while you're driving, if you're listening to us in the car. If you're at home, just as much as you can, feel your body. A lot of times we're so running around up in our heads and listening to all that stuff going on about what we need to do and who we need to be. We can let all of that go. And then I'm just going to let you for the next moment or so, just take your own next few breaths, really just allowing yourself that gift of presence and breath. And again, as you're taking your last breaths, just remembering that this is a great, simple tool to use before you have a conversation with anyone, whether it's on the phone or on Zoom or in person, to really connect to yourself. I really do believe that our presence truly is the best gift we can give each other. And so as we start, I want to thank Polly and Brenda. I know you two are both so busy, and this means so much that you've taken the time to be here. I'm going to have each of you, as we always do, introduce yourself and just, tell us about like what's exciting in your work right now. And one thing I'd love to hear from each of you is we called this the healing power of conversation. And I'd love to hear from each of you, what do you find healing about good conversation? Polly, we'll start with you.
Well, sure. Hi, I'm Polly Campbell, and I'm the author of several books, including You Recharged, which is my most recent one, How to Beat Fatigue, Mostly Amp Up Your Energy Usually, and Enjoy Life Again Always. And I'll tell you straight up today, I have been in a ringer of a day. Crazy things have been happening. I felt really frantic before our moment of silence, our meditation there at the start. And I was finding all the reasons why I didn't think I could sit down and do this. And I intended to do this because I love both of you and I made a commitment, but I wasn't in the right headspace. And that's when I realized while I was getting a cup of coffee before this, that I needed this more than ever, because conversations can be so grounding if they're taken with kindness. And compassion and intention. And also in my book, You Recharged, I write about how they're also a source of energy for me. And I'm an introvert, but when you are in do conversation at the right time with the person who needs to be there, we can get into what I mean by that a little later if anybody wants to know. But and you're committed to those moments together, there's always something inspiring. I feel better about myself. I feel empowered. I feel less lonely and less alone. Two different things. And I feel more connected, not only to the individual I'm with, but to myself and who I am in this greater place of humanity. So in that way, it's always healing for me. But straight up, and I write about this in my books, I have to remind myself of that because I do get in that headspace where I'm running around. Okay, I have 5 minutes for this. I have 10 minutes for this. And it's only when I stop and have these moments that I'm actually more productive. I'm healthier. I'm happier. I am more confident. And so I think for me, that's really how the best conversations work.
Oh, Polly. I just want to say, me too, me too, me too. Everything you're saying, because, and I think I've talked to a lot of people about this. A lot of people I know have the same thing, right? It's like we might have a call scheduled or something on the books with a friend, and it's like, I can't. I'm not in the right space. I don't want to. And yet, exactly what we need is on the other side of that, kind of like what you're saying, right? And I do want to hear more about what you said about the right person on the other end, because that's important too. But thank you for all of that. That was beautiful.
Yes. And so I'm so happy to be here in conversation with you both. And right before this, like 15 minutes before this, like the next door neighbors decided to start cutting, like trimming some bushes, but they were using like an extremely loud, just like, yeah, like, and then like another neighbor started like with some other, like on both sides there was a really loud noise, and I was like, oh my goodness, like that's gonna be, how's that gonna go, like with Heart Wisdom? Well, it's just gonna have to work out, like life happens. And then immediately, like right when Heart Wisdom was starting, all of the noise stopped. It was like they knew magically. And so I was like giggling about that. But I think that like the idea of having talking about the healing power of good conversation was because I talked to Polly. I think we had a Zoom maybe 3 weeks ago, and I had been feeling very ungrounded and sick, and cooked out is one of my little like term for when I get all up in my head. I was cooking out. And then like 10 minutes into it, I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad we're doing this. And then I was just getting more and more grounded and like out of my head and into my body. It's just because Polly is so soulful and so smart and such a good person and so kind and everything that like she was like healing me.
That's nice to say.
Yeah. And then, and I feel like Heart Wisdom, like this series that you're curating, Sherry, there's been a lot of like major healing moments, major soul moments, breakthrough thinking. I mean, so I feel like this is what we're doing when we're having Heart Wisdom. And then I thought I would just share like one other little like main author moment where David Quincy he's writes about mindfulness, and Quiet Mind is one of his great books. And he's old school in the best possible way. So he wanted to have a meeting over coffee in the middle of the day, which is hard for me to tear myself away from the desk and the Zoom and all that. And I was like, well, okay, I really like him and I really like Pete's coffee. So, okay. So I did it. I was just thinking like, oh, like I sort of was feeling that like dozens and dozens of emails were coming into my inbox while I was out coughing. But then like the minute we sat down and started talking, I was so glad I was there. And then we were talking about his books. And then he mentioned something that I didn't know about his book, which is Nothing's Wrong. It's about men's feelings and helping men like accept that they actually have feelings and like process them and all that. And he said, Brenda, like, I've gotten many letters from men telling me that this book saved their life. And I was like, oh, like I was just so moved by that. And it reminded me like of why I do this.
Yes.
Why I hunt down authors like you and Polly to publish so that like your books can make it a better world. Mm-hmm. So I think that like maybe my message is, don't let the busy trap you into not having good conversation.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's a good bumper sticker.
Yeah, that is a good bumper sticker.
And gosh, I'm just already, one of the things I want to say, like I too, you guys, I was having a frazzled day. What'd you call it? Cuckoo. I was just
Cooked out.
Me too. And same thing, right? Like we've all pointed to this, like when you sat down with David, it's the same thing. Like as soon as I saw you two, I was like, oh, this is what matters. This is what's important. This is what's going to heal me. And it's already true. And I love that. I really appreciate just having you guys here. And I wanted to share, if it's okay, also what I was thinking about recently about good conversation and why it's healing. And because I had a great conversation with a friend of mine the other day. And I said to her at the end, what I love so much about our conversations is we're not reporting to each other, but rather we're in a discovery process with lots of room. And this is true, like lots of room for life to drop in intuition and ideas and stories. And what you guys are both writers and authors, so you'll know this too, right? Like it's the difference between when you're writing something and like where you want it to go versus where you're letting the writing discover something and unfold. And to me, I was thinking like, this is what the heart wisdom panels are, right? Like I always say to people, don't prepare anything. We don't want it to be like, here are my 5 bullet points, because that doesn't leave a lot of room for life. There's places for that. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that in because I feel as if it's one of the things that all of our authors, you two included, are always willing to do, which is to show up and sort of trust that life will bring in something that we want or need.
Absolutely. Yes. And then I was reflecting on the fact that I said that like when I was, walking to the coffee shop to meet David, that I was thinking like, oh, emails, like they're just sending and being present. But then like face to face with David, like I was there. I was fully present.
Sherry, when you talked about that discovery, first of all, I think that's 100%. Not 100%. It's why I'm a writer. The other part of that is I get to buy notebooks and pens. And so that's why I'm a writer. But I think that discovery is an opportunity for a writer, but it's also an opportunity for all of us, because a writer will go through the world and notice things and overhear conversations and think. And the things I write about are also things I need to discover about myself. And I learn from my friends, and I learn from other writers, and I learn from you and Brenda, and I learn from these people. But I think it takes an intention and openness that on my worst days, I don't always have, right? I have to get into it. Like Brenda said, once I'm there, it's fine. And I'll never forget, Brenda and I have worked together for a few years, and over this time, I think we've become friends because she's somebody I really like and admire. But we started in a professional relationship, and I was a new author. And in our very first conversation, I was pretty freaked out, and I was wanting to impress, and I wanted this deal to work and all this. And the first thing she said to me after she introduced herself, and I use it all the time. This is like 15 years ago. The first thing she said is, I want you to know, I set the intention to have a conversation that is both enjoyable and peaceful and connective for both of us. And I have never forgotten that, because it immediately took the steam out, right? It's like, okay, she wants the same things I want, which is not to feel like a fool and not to be hurt and not to have this fail. We wanted the same things. We wanted to connect over this idea. And Brenda, I've used that with every conversation that I remember, and every business conversation for sure, ever since, because I think when you taught me to set the intention before I go in, so I'm grounded in my body, so that I can bring that soul to the other person and let them know, whether I articulate it or not. I don't always say it out loud, but I want to create an energetic space that is safe for them too, so that I can kind of embody that, so that we can both get what we want, right? Whether it's a business transaction or a personal time with a special friend, or I want everybody to feel better when we end that conversation, no matter what we're talking about. And so that was a useful lesson to me, and it's helped me over the years for sure.
Polly, could you repeat
hear that?
I love that so much. And I think it's really important. I set the intention for a conversation that is enjoyable. And what were the other things that you said?
Enjoyable, peaceful, and connective.
Peaceful and connecting.
And we were making a deal. Like, we were talking about money things. We were talking about her business and my business. And it was not about that we're going to be hugely successful and sell 1 billion books, or you're going to write the book like this. It was all about how we were going to come into relationship in that moment. And I think laying the groundwork that way with that intention showed me a lot about who Brenda was and who she was representing as a company. And that was somebody I wanted to be aligned with. But it also showed me that I could relax and be authentic. I didn't have to sell something I wasn't. So I was true, and that was good enough, right? That's what they wanted in the end. Took the pressure off me a lot.
You know, and what I love so much about this is that even before you're on a conversation with someone or in face to face, when we come with that sort of intention, it's already changing something in us, right? I call it like priming the pump, right? It's an old-fashioned term when you used to love to prime the water pump, but it's like, before I get together with someone or I'm on a call, I will often think, you know, who do I want to be? You know, and it changes, you know, sometimes it, you know, it might be playful. Sometimes it might be, you know, really caring and compassionate, you know, but I usually try and think of a few different adjectives. I did this when I met Brenda, you know, while I was walking to meet her, like, you know, how do I want to be? Because that intention that we're talking about is really actually a part of the healing conversation, even though it happens beforehand. So I love that. Brenda, did you want to say anything about like how that came to you or how you use that still?
Well, I knew that Polly was a deeply spiritual person, you know, because I, after the proposal came in, like, and I discovered that she was a blogger in perfect spirituality, like, I like had myself a good time and like read a lot of her blogging, and a part of what Polly is about is reminding us that we're all human and that's okay. And so I think I connected with her on like a spiritual, we're all human here and it's okay level. So I think I was like wanting to like get on the vibration that I thought would work for Polly and me.
And it worked.
Yeah.
15 years later, we're still working together.
And it's beautiful. I mean, just think about, I mean, I'm really struck by this, right? That it's like, here we are 15 years later, somehow having a conversation about conversation. And here Polly brings these words that you use, Brenda. Like, if that doesn't tell us something about our legacy, right? Like, we never know what, you know, what we're role modeling for people and what they might remember for the rest of their lives. And now hopefully others of us will carry that.
Well, think about it from the opposite. Like, you know, when you're getting a sales pitch, right? You know, when somebody does not have you in mind, when they're selling something maybe they don't even believe in. And it often turns us off, and we may not know why, right? If you meet somebody for the first time and we're in conversation with them at a party, and all of a sudden they're trying to impress, and I'm sure I've done that before, they're trying to impress, and they're talking about what they've done this, or they did this, or they know, and it doesn't feel real. And that is not a healing conversation for me. That is just the opposite. That's like, ooh, I don't feel good enough. I don't feel connective. I don't feel these things, So I always think of it in terms of that. I want to leave the conversation, even when it's a difficult one. Let's be honest, there are hard conversations, but I want to leave that feeling grounded in myself, but also hoping that the other person feels some peace in that too. I don't want to do harm. Sometimes I do in my marriage, and sometimes I say the wrong thing. Sometimes I'm angry. On my best days, though, I'm very aware that I want to bring something better so we can deal with the difficulty in a way that leaves us both together, still aligned,
Yeah. Polly, that's bringing to mind one of the notes that I made that I just wanted to bring in and ask you guys what you thought. But one of the things that I brought in was that, to me, part of a really healing conversation is that anyone who's there feels seen and heard and, accepted. And something about what you just said made me kind of think of that it's, we've all already mentioned this. If we're just in our heads thinking about those emails piling up or whatever, we can't see each other. We can't really hear each other. We can't be connected. And so I'm just curious if you two have any thoughts about what enables you to really, be able to like show up in the way that Polly's talking about, where we're with this other person and not just putting stuff out.
Well, I'll start off by saying that I think it has to do with emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is a funny phrase because it almost sounds like, well, I'm smarter than you when it comes to feelings and things like that. So, but it's I didn't come up with the term, but I think about it every day. And in fact, I just acquired a book yesterday about emotional intelligence in business.
That's great.
Yeah, and so literally comes down to how to not do a sales pitch that will turn you off and shut you down. I think emotional intelligence is literally lots and lots of listening, deep listening, and allowing your intuition to flow. And I don't even know if it's much more than that, than paying attention, really, really listening, and I guess caring enough to do all that, and then allowing your intuition to activate. And I think that that is what emotional intelligence is to me. And if you just do that, people just want to be seen. People just want to be acknowledged. People just want to be heard. And that's just but there's less and less of that in the world today. So I'm hoping that we're reminding some people that it's doable, that's really important, and it truly is healing. I mean, I don't want to go down politics, but if there was more listening, actually really, really listening in politics today, things would be better.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I wasn't this way yesterday. I had very little emotional intelligence in a conversation I was having. I should bring my husband in here and he can tell you what a good conversation looks like, because it wasn't yesterday. I did not feel seen, and I trust him. I mean, everything is fine, but I did not feel seen. And instead of listening to what I was hearing and going inside and taking stock of what that was doing, I reacted. And I think for me, and I reacted in a way that didn't see him. It wasn't a compassionate reaction. I went all to my head, and I was angry and hurt. I was blah, 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 blah. And it was at the end of that we both came back and started to really talk about what was going on. And I remember thinking during that second conversation that I wish I had taken the pause to not only experience what I was feeling, but what he was really saying, because it doesn't always come through for words. And I know this person, and we've been together a long time. He would never intentionally hurt me. I know that. And yet I didn't have the patience or the tolerance to do what Brenda is saying, which is, I heard something that I didn't like. I immediately reacted instead of listening. I think it would have been a healthier situation to sit back and say, I'm interested in my reaction to this. I'm wondering why this is triggering me. What's going on? And really understanding myself and where he was coming from. And I think in the world, politically and all the other areas, that is so hard to do. But I've never had a time in my life when I've done that where things got worse, right? Never.
Wow.
Like, I'm not going to change his mind, but when I'm yelling and lashing out at him, or when I'm trying to convince our neighbor to vote a different way, but I might help them hear something different if I'm calm and loving and compassionate and recognizing we both have our own needs and both our own experiences. And that kind of deep listening, I think, is the way to get there, like Brenda mentioned. And it's a challenge for me. It's something I really have to sit in. I'm getting better at it, but I keep writing about it, so I keep learning about it. My work.
Well, and that just was immensely helpful for me, Polly. So of course you're also like teaching as you're learning, of course. But one of the things that dropped in, and again, this is what life does, right? When we're in a good conversation, I didn't think this up, but life dropped in, anticipate the good in people, anticipate the best intentions. What if we anticipate, like you're saying, because that's what you do with your husband, in your best moments, but it's probably like 90% of the time, he's coming from his heart. And you're not, I think all too often what's happening is we're jumping on things, and we're almost looking for, this is a feeling I get when I look at something, like online social media sometimes. It's almost as if people are just waiting to pounce rather than stepping back, like Polly said, and thinking, this person is likely coming from the best possible place, or at least I can project that. And then that changes the dynamic.
Yeah. And I think that goes to what your question was earlier about the healing conversations, and the depth of that. Healing conversations for me come from, I do have that sense of trust. And it doesn't always have to be somebody I've known a long time. And it doesn't have to be somebody I know well, but you can sense, like we talked about before, the energy that they're bringing into the conversation. And I think certainly in the people that I know well and trust, there's a reason they're in my life. It's because I chose them to be in my life, and they keep coming back. And so if they're going to say something that I perceive as difficult or hard, reacting is not the best way to go, but responding and saying, oh, that feels difficult or hard, is the way to get to that healing place, because I'm choosing to be with people I can trust now. And that's not been everybody in my life always. Like, I'm not saying the first guy you meet on the street is the one you have this conversation with, but you need to look and see the people in your life that you can have those conversations with, and then put them in position when you need to have that dialogue. Put yourself in position to connect with them. So when all that we talk about how all these things I don't want to go to, when I schedule them, I make a pact with myself. I will go unless there's an emergency or unless they need to cancel for some reason, which happens a lot because our lives are busy. But if I commit to it, I will be there, because then that's a commitment I make to myself, to be in a position to develop these trusts and these relationships and these things that fulfill me. And hopefully them too. Hopefully it's both of us.
And Polly, I just want to acknowledge you for a minute, because I'm thinking about, I know because you said this, and Brenda too, I'm going to say the same thing to her, that you've both said, like, today was kind of a kooky day or whatever. It's a wanky day. There's jangles. It's, and it's not just the showing up, which you both did, right? You did both show up, but I feel like there was a second thing that you did, was that you were honest about the jangles and the wonkiness, but you didn't let that energy lead our conversation. And I love that. I think there's something super important about not showing up all fake. Oh, hey, hi, oh yeah, me, great. That's that sort of, toxic positivity sometimes. But an authentic way of like showing up, like, wow, this day just, I'm super ungrounded, and yet I'm so happy to be here with you, and I'm here. You brought, both of you, you brought a readiness for connection. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I also, something popped in for me, like I guess I couldn't help but like think just a little bit more about like the political climate. When people, we see them on like, CNN or whatever, or like in debates or something, they have prepared talking points. They have to just bark out their talking points. They're not even wanting to do anything else, just get their talking points out. So they're talking at you. They're talking at us. They're not. It's not a conversation at all. It's it's performative. And like that for them, that's just the point, because I guess they have to like move poll numbers or whatever. But I wish there could be like more of a revolution in in like public dialogue, and that it really was public dialogue, and that it went two ways. I can always hope for the positive, and I actually am hopeful, because I think that like generation Y and Z, I call them Zillennials, different from millennials. But like they are, I read this article, I think like 20 years ago, that like that generations are cyclical. There's certain kinds of people that like come through like, in 20-year cycles. And so the Zillennials are most akin, according to like, psychologists and, people that like really, really know what makes people tick. And they say that they're like the greatest generation, which was like, my mom and dad, actually. Like my dad served in World War II, and my mom was a child in the Great Depression. And like they of course didn't know we were going to be fighting Nazis or whatever. Like nobody knew that until it happened. But they stood up together and served, and there was like a real like unified sense. Like we have to save, like we have to. It was good and evil. It was sort of like, really, it was good and evil, and they were fighting for good. And so like the the articles I read about that said that like this generation Z, I guess it really is, but we'll give the generation Y some credit too. They will rise up together for a cause. And when I read that, I thought, oh, it's going to be the planet. They're going to save the planet.
Yeah, I think I'm always hopeful, but it's well founded, because I can walk out the door and see things that are working, and there's also a lot of things that aren't working. And I think what you said, Brenda, it really hit me, because I think that's one of the challenges we have, getting people interested in and engaged in public policy again. Unfortunately, it's taken really scary and awful things to happen for people to rise up, because for decades people have been talking at us. So I don't feel part of the conversation. I vote, I do those things, but it hasn't been until recently that I decided, recently, the last 10 years, that I decided whether I'm part of the conversation or not, I need to stand up for myself and these other people that I care about in this world that I care about. And now I'm seeing the shift, and my daughter is in the generation talking about, and they are absolutely more unified than my generation. We were just trying to get by, with our divorced parents and our moms who had gone back to work while we were growing up. And the men changed, it was all different. But her generation, my goodness, they are in this global politics class that is staging the next march about gun rights. And, they are bold, and know that this isn't right. And they are talking to each other. And I think when we have leadership in our families, in our companies, in our political system, in our courts, where it is a conversation, that's the only way they're going to learn. And that's the only way we're able to engage. And I think that is when the conversation is healing, when we can learn from each other and feel like we are valued and able to engage and participate in that experience. And absolutely, in raising our daughter, and this is common in her friends' households too, but they have opinions. She'll sit at the dinner table and tell me what she's thinking, and I'm wrong, and here's why, and she supported. They're teaching very critical thinking instead of just memorization. And I'll tell you what, these young women in particular are finding room for their voice that they've never had before. And that, to me, those make for the conversations if we don't get afraid, right? Just because we hear something we don't like doesn't mean it's a bad conversation. It can be great.
Very good point. Yeah.
This is so good. I just really, Brenda, I appreciate so much that you even brought in talking points, because I had never really thought about that we, our generation, was raised on talking points, right? Like, and just like Polly was saying, what did that teach us, subliminally about how people are in dialogue, because that's not. And the other thing I love is what Polly said, because I see it in my own son, this like, I love, he's got such strong opinions, and they teach them this. I know they teach them this in school. He knows when to stop and to say, what do you think? What do you see about this? And he really listens. And a lot of times it's, we're different generations. We have different ideas. But like Polly said, there's nothing to be afraid of. And there is something really healing when two people are listening. Curiosity, I think, is a big piece of it.
Absolutely. It's hard to be angry too when you're curious. I was having a discussion with a very close friend, one of my best friends, the other day at a dinner. We were having a great time, and she said something I just do not agree with. And I was about to start talking because I'm a talker, right? I'm a writer. I have words. And instead, I sat back, and it's so interesting to me that this person would come up with that thought. That's not what I knew about her. So I asked that question, like, that's interesting to me. Tell me why you think that. And it was awesome. It was a great discussion. She made good sense. I haven't changed my mind, but I'll tell you what, the gears are cranking. I'm learning more about my life and my experience, and we're closer than ever because I learned something about her. And I thought, we have to hold that space for curiosity and, like Brenda said earlier, discovery, without stepping all over it. I like to step all over that and then tell you what I think. And the point is, it doesn't matter. I want to be curious about what everyone's thinking and how we can use that to relate together on this planet.
Well, it's because you're open-minded, and I think that, like, for whatever reason, like in the last 20 years that I can speak to, like, there's been like a closing of the American mind. I mean, and I don't want to go negative, but I think that, like, social media and, like, certain, like, new, like cable news, like there's multiple cable news, they're probably all contributed to the closing of the American mind. And, like, I'm sure hopeful that, like, the millennials can pry it back open, and I think they can.
I love that. I think go ahead, Polly. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just curious more on that. I wonder too, because there's a lot of people-pleasing behavior online, right?
Yeah.
And I as a reformed people pleaser, but online there's a lot of people-pleasing behavior. You'll write what you think other people will like instead of what you're really thinking or how you feel about something, or not writing at all, right? And I wonder if that isn't part of that, because it feels good to get those likes and harder to go your own way or with a different opinion. And I don't think
it literally gives you an endorphin kick.
Right.
So it become addictive.
And it's not real, right? It's not real,
They're
but
not real. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, like, I hope I can say this succinctly and not take us down a rabbit hole. But I went to a birthday party, like the first birthday party, like, in person for a long time that wasn't inside. It was in San Francisco in the Castro district. And, I was very much looking forward to it. It was my best friend's birthday. And, I was surprised to see so many people because I thought, oh, it would be like 12 or 15 because it's inside. COVID isn't really over. It's not completely over. So you still got to be mindful. And there was like probably 30 people there. So I was surprised by that. And there weren't open doors or windows. And so I was just, And then, I to a room that was less populated and sat at a window that had a beautiful view. There's a couple people in there. A person started talking to me. It was a fun conversation. There were a couple of things where I was like, I wonder what that's about. But I just went with it, rolled with it, did a lot of listening. And then there were two sort of ranty moments that had to do with anti-vaxxing and then also being pro-Putin. I'm not kidding. And I think, and I this was, so I was just happening. And I literally didn't even think about it. I just stood up. My body just said, get up and get out. And so I said to this person, I said, I'm worried for you that your mind is being manipulated by algorithms. Maybe you're seeing this on YouTube or whatever. But I said, vaccinations saved perhaps millions of lives. And I said, anyone that is pro-Putin, I can't even be in the same room with you. I said, I hope you're okay. And then I made my excuses and left the party because I realized we were all possibly being exposed by an anti-vaxxer.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I didn't want to be in the same room with somebody that thinks Putin is right. But that was a conversation gone wrong, where I was doing lots of listening, and I think she got so comfortable that she just thought she could really open the floodgates of weirdness. But what was interesting to me is that my body, I didn't think oh, I need to get up. I just shot up out of my chair, and I was on the move, and I had made my brief statements, and I tried to be nice and compassionate, although obviously I sounded judgmental when I said you're being manipulated by algorithms, and I worry for you. I hope you're okay. But that was a physical reaction to a conversation that I couldn't have predicted. I was just shot up. My legs did the talking, and I got out.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the trust part, and that is that's interesting that you didn't even think about it, because I think there's a limit of trusting yourself in that too, right? That you knew you had to go. And I wonder, I find myself sometimes in difficult moments trying to make it okay. And there are just things that don't feel okay in me, right? There are just things that don't feel safe to me. And those aren't people I want to have. You had a conversation, it sounds like, but then after a certain point, you understand, okay, well, this isn't going to be healthy for me.
Yes. And I was, I didn't feel safe. And then I agonized over something, but I did it. I had to text my best friend and say, I'm worried that everyone there is being exposed possibly to COVID by somebody who's an anti-vaxxer. And my main worry that the special guest of my best friend was an 85-year-old woman that has pulmonary something that makes it very difficult for her to breathe. And she's an elder woman of color. And I was just like, my worst nightmare, oh my God, if she's exposed and gets sick, like that, and so I had to basically, ruin my best friend's birthday party by saying, I'm sorry, I think you have to take precautions. And this is what just happened. And you need to know, and you need to protect Jay, the her. So that was like, but like, there's healing conversations, and then there's conversations where
Yep.
that are like dangerous. I mean, I felt like a sense of danger. I mean, not that she was going to come over and like whomp me over the head or something. It just, I immediately, like, and it was bodily. It was like an emotion. It was like a physical intelligence that was taking over for me, and like my body was just like, no choice, got to move, and I honored that. I listened to my body. I tried to be kind but honest and direct, and I got the heck out of there because I didn't safe. And sadly, like, I think that what you touched on, Polly, like a couple minutes ago, that like it's not even humans. It's social media isn't even humans, so it's algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that you guys are pointing to something really important. And I was thinking it before you even said it, Brenda, right? Like, not all conversations have to be, first of all, we don't have to continue them if we're feeling like, for any reason, we don't want to be there, right? Like, unless, of course, it's our spouse or our child, I would say, or, someone we have an ongoing relationship with, and we do need to show up in a certain way. But even then, we could leave in the moment. But it's like this discernment, right? And Polly mentioned this right off the bat. Discernment. Like, we don't want to go around just thinking that we're going to have these wonderful, loving, discovery kinds of conversations with everyone in the world, right? It's a beautiful thought, but not necessarily going to happen. Because the other thing that came up for me when, Brenda, you were talking, was something that's a little bit adjacent, not quite the same thing you're talking about, but when I was thinking about healing conversations versus otherwise, one of the things that came up for me is when you're in a conversation with someone who simply wants to tell you what to do, how to be, what's the right way, that kind of, and it is a little bit close because you're talking about your conversation, someone who's just strident in their beliefs. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, I have a lot of conversations with people in my life about this, about, when someone comes to you and says like, oh my God, let me tell you about this issue that I have. And I've learned in my life from some great teachers to say, do you just want to vent about this? Do you just want somebody who's listening to you, or do you want me to share anything I'm thinking around it? Because trying to really avoid that place of, let me tell you what I think, which can just be an instant, like, shut down any sort of conversation. So I thought I'd throw that in the mix because I think it's also a part of.
Yeah, I think that's valuable. And I think it comes to that, back to that point of, are they talking at you? Or are they truly curious? Because I think the best conversations are an exchange of information. And if somebody's going off about their political views on and on and on as a way of recruiting you, that's not a conversation, right?
Right.
That's the spitting out, that's the talking at you. And I lose patience with that real quick. I find, this is an interesting statement. I find most conversations, even the best ones, very depleting because I invest a lot in them. So if somebody's talking at me and I can't find a point to hold on to, or a point of commonality or understanding or learning, then I feel untethered and it makes me very anxious, right? And yet, even in the deep, when we finish our talk today, which has been totally rejuvenating for me, I will be thinking about your ideas and thoughts and comments for days probably, and how I can integrate some of these things into my own life and what I shared and so forth. And so I take it very seriously. So as I age, I'm finding I'm less inclined to put up with conversations that don't support me in an equal way, or teach me something, or build me, or or enliven me or are curious, whatever it is. It doesn't always have to be great, but it's always, the people in my life, they have valuable things to say. And I want to be in conversation with them because I am enriched by it too. And I'm less patient with those that just want to be heard without having that information exchange.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, want to be heard, causes my mind to circle back to something you said at the very beginning of this Heart Wisdom, which you said that conversation makes you feel less lonely and less alone, two different things. And I do think I know you have people and a family and so I know that you're, not truly deeply and you're actually not alone, but many people are. And I think that because they are not talking to people, I guess, except on Facebook or whatever, they forget how to be in conversation.
Yes, I agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Brenda, that brings up something I'm so glad that I really want to make sure we at least touched on, which is kind of the opposite side of a lot of what we've been talking about, which is, what is it that enables someone to be vulnerable or to ask for help or to share their voice? I know a lot of people I talk to, they're in conversation, but they're afraid to say to someone, I'm having a hard time, or I really could use some support with this. Right. So it's the opposite of those people who are talking at you, but people who maybe need some encouragement of, is it really okay for me to take up space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting conversation in itself, and one I've thought about my whole life. When I wrote and published my first book with Brenda, people that have always supported me and loved me were uncomfortable with the fact that I was writing some personal stories in it. And it's not a memoir, but there are personal stories because in my life, I come at things from my own experience because I'm having the same challenges, right? I want to hear what people have to say and I want to show them what I've learned. And maybe between the two of us, we can work it out. So there was some, who do you think you are to write a personal development book? What do you bring to this picture? And so it took me a while before I sent proposals around because I had to be in that space with myself. And I'm just this. And that's enough. If I can do it, anybody can do it. That's ultimately what I landed on. Right. And if it doesn't work for you, don't read the book. That's okay too, right? But I think women in particular, because I am one, so I'm not going to speak to the male counterparts, but growing up, we were taught to be a lot quieter and a lot more polite and show up a certain way. And it's been an interesting unraveling and discovery in my own life to say, oh, wait, no, I'm not going to be convenient. And that's okay. I can be inconvenient and they can decide whether they want that part of me or not. Or I can be funny and they can pick and choose that. But it's been a process of discovery. So what I do when I'm in conversation, hoping to encourage that in others, is to I ask a lot of questions and I really want to know the answers. And then I lead with, like I did in this visit, with things that I didn't get right. I mean, I'm vulnerable on myself because I imagine any conversation anybody's in, there's a certain part of vulnerability. It doesn't matter. We're always bringing a piece of ourselves. And even if we're confident people, it feels vulnerable to say, well, this is what I'm thinking. And so I always bring the worst case and the best case. Yeah, I'm a mess too. And look, here's how I figured it out. And maybe there's a commonality there. So if you want to find your space that way, look for the things you have in common with the person you're talking to, because I bet it's more than you think. And that's what we need. We need to remember our humanity and the compassion. And from there, we can build into some conversation that's going to be important.
That's beautiful, Polly. That's so beautiful. And it also makes me think of for me, I've had it's been a practice learning to ask for help, or to ask, to be able to be, I love what you said, not convenient is I love that. And so I know for me, it's like when I see other people do it, it really serves me, right? Because it helps me, like, oh, my friend is, she's asking me for support or help in this moment. So I know that I can do that, and I think there's something about role modeling for each other, more of that.
I'm always grateful too when somebody shows up to talk to me. And I imagine that there's that piece of us in other people. I'm always grateful that you would invite me to come talk with you and Brenda, because I know I'm going to be better for it. And it's a privilege for me to sit down with somebody, and that my friends and my husband and my family, who know me better than anyone else, keep showing up. That is a gift. And I try to remember that. I try to hold that close and nurture those relationships, whether I'm feeling confident about it or not, because I want them to know that I value that. I don't take it lightly, no matter who I'm talking to. I take it very seriously. And that's because I value their time and attention. I take them seriously. And that's not to mean I'm not hilarious, because I am hilarious. I mean, I don't take myself seriously, I hope, but I can value our relationship in a way and bring that integrity into the conversation, so that hopefully they can feel that too, and feel better about where we're at in our dialogue with each other.
Oh, they're so beautiful. I love you guys so much. And what you just said, Polly, I think is everything, right? And it's how I like to end a lot of our Heart Wisdom panels, which is to remind people, right, when we show up for each other, that is a gift. And you just said that, Polly, so beautifully and eloquently. And I brought a quote I wanted to share, and I do think it's actually the perfect thing. I wasn't sure if it would be perfect, but one of my favorite quotes is from Kurt Vonnegut Jr. And he said, "I urge you to please notice when you're happy, and exclaim or murmur or think, at some point, if this isn't nice, I don't know what is." And that's, I've been feeling this whole hour. I'm like a different person right now than I was before you two got on this call, right? I was so frazzly and ungrounded and untethered, and now I feel like different. And if this isn't nice, having a good conversation with healing and wonderful people, I don't know what is.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for including me.
And thank you both for showing up so authentically. We call it the Heart Wisdom Panel, and I feel like that's what happens, right? It's like people come from their hearts, and there's also so many great, things to think about. And like Polly said, we'll be thinking about them for, weeks on end. So thank you. Thanks for the way you show up, both of you.
Sherry, I know we got to run, but one of the things that you do that helps me show up and makes me excited about it is you create a safe space. And it's not just blabbering. You bring thoughtful questions, you bring good energy, you bring intelligent ideas. And so I know that not only am I going to feel better as a person, but I'm going to be successful in the conversation, because you're there to hold us, right? To help us through that. And that's not something that's easy to do. So I appreciate that.
Nicely said.
And that means the world to me. That really means the world to me. Thank you. Mwah. Hey, we'll actually be back with the Heart Wisdom Panel next week with some big love for Hawaii. And so, Polly, if you're able to, you can join us in the Facebook group or whatever. But I hope people will come back, and love to you guys.
You too. Thanks.
Back at ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.